think we're good to go, Rachel?
I think we're good to go, yes. Shall I start? Do we have a
Yeah.
bell or a symbol?
All yours,
All
Rachel.
good then. Thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to do these community outreach events. And interestingly, LinkedIn brings me quite a lot of that. I guess because I'm quite vocal about movement and health more generally and the aging process as I myself age, as we all do, and how that affects my body and also my well-being and so on. But yeah, I'm Dr. Rachel Jefferson. I'm a senior lecturer and discipline lead in human movement studies and creative arts, so very much an interdisciplinary researcher. So I have a strong science background, but I also have a very strong arts background, being a dance specialist as well. So I've been at Charles Sturt University for 13 years, and I've worked here very much online a lot because we're a huge regional provider for online education across New South Wales, but also beyond New South Wales. And also, I have been sort of primarily focused a little bit far away from you in Canberra, in Albury, Wodonga, because at one point, Tony and I were talking about me coming live to talk with you as well. But the power of Zoom brings us all together instead, which is lovely. That was my suggestion to kind of resolve the traveling and so on. Prior to living in Australia, I'm sure you wouldn't know or guess, but I am actually from the UK. And my accent is obviously from there. Although I don't think I have an accent, I think you all have accents. But there we go. I'm the imposter here. And prior to that, I was working in academia for 9 years in the UK at Bath Spa University in the southwest of England. I'm originally from Plymouth down in the southwest. And prior to that, I was working for a long period of time, just over 12, 13 years in the International School of Geneva, where I was based in Switzerland and I was head of physical education and health. So a very, very strong science background, but also the educational context as well. I do have a global reputation for my curriculum design in health and physical education, and I've worked with Cambridge University for a long time now, and other humanitarian organizations such as UNICEF or UNESCO, in a range of very low resource countries. So today, what I want to do is to talk with you about movement and talk with you about aging, but not from a kind of biohacking premise, but basically trying to sort of dissolve the anti-aging fantasy that there is out there that we see, and to draw on some of my own work around evidence-based approaches that we can take to aging. And one of my articles, particularly that was very popular, which was based on aging and what kinds of age evidence-based perspectives we can take as we get older. So the key question that I'd like to use to guide this talk, which I'll circle back at the end and revisit, is if we can't reverse aging, what can we meaningfully do to age well? So aging is universal, but how we age varies enormously. And I'm going to be partially, as I mentioned, drawing on my conversation article from 2023, where I asked the question, very much about, what is out there in the world on the level of anti-aging possibilities. So my article was entitled, "No, You Can't Reverse Aging by Injecting Young Blood and Fasting, but that doesn't stop people trying." And it clearly struck a chord at the time with the general public. The current number of reads is more than 90,000. It led to a plethora of television and radio appearances for me as well. So there is this sort of growing industry promising the reversal of aging through fasting, through taking supplements, through blood transfusions, which sound pretty gory to me. Yet many of these claims are really not supported by hardcore, robust human evidence. And this matters because, as a researcher, I need to present evidence, obviously, when I offer possibilities out there to the general public. And we know that movement remains one of the most powerful, accessible, and low-cost interventions for healthy aging. We need to focus on aspects like that are doable as opposed to getting distracted from what we do, what we don't know so much about. Now, in my conversation article, I addressed some of the more what I would call extreme views of anti-aging claims, particularly the idea of transfusing young blood and prolonged fasting for, 23 hours of the 24 hours each day and things like that. And I drew upon Brian Johnson's claims. He spends an average, which makes me horrified to think of the volume of money that is spent on it. But he spends an average of $2 million a year on an anti-aging regimen, and he now ages apparently slower than children. These are his claims anyway. He explains himself, and I've quoted that in my article, that the pace my body accumulates aging damage is less than the average 10-year-old. So big claims.
Mhm.
However, these ideas often come from animal studies, and they also come from small, uncontrolled trials. And in humans, there is actually no convincing evidence that these approaches reverse aging. And on top of that, there are ethical concerns and there are safety concerns. So, US biotech companies have explored plasma infusions to tackle age-related diseases in humans, actually for decades. So nothing new there. But there are no proven clinical benefits to that. Side effects from blood transfusions are also plentiful. They include blood-borne infections, fever, allergic reactions, and so on. So it's important for us to remember that cosmetic or surface level changes do not equate to biological or functional health. While aging itself cannot be reversed, we can influence how it unfolds. The strongest evidence that we have, which I'm sure you're all aware of, is that we need to consistently think and practice lifestyle factors. And this is about, reflecting on sleep hygiene, nutrition, social connection, which obviously your organization does very well, and critically, physical activity. So movement supports multiple systems at once, muscles, bones, cardiovascular health, metabolic function, but also mental and social well-being and health more generally. So unlike these quick fixes, also I would say very costly fixes, by Brian Johnson, these benefits we know are cumulative and we know that they are also long term. And as I say in my conversation article, from middle age onwards, we all need to exercise regularly to increase our muscle mass, our bone density, our strength, our endurance, our coordination, and very much so our balance. So, one of the greatest health risks for older people is falling, which I'm sure you know, and balance, flexibility, endurance and strength training can all help reduce those kinds of risks. And physical activity can bring also social benefits to older adults if undertaken in groups. And there are well-known mental health gains as well. Now, the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, the AIHW, advises us that falls are the leading cause of injury-related hospitalizations in and deaths in Australia. And in 2023 to 2024, there were 248,000 hospitalizations due to falls, making up 43% of all injury hospital admissions. Now, on the level of these kinds of statistics, it's a little bit of a worry because what we're seeing is that Australians aged 65 and over are almost 12 times as likely to be hospitalized due to a fall than adults aged 25 to 44. So, if we look at sort of women in particular, we find interestingly, which obviously as a woman I find, is that age 65 plus accounted for around 63%, so a little bit more tending to be hospitalized than men in particularly over the age of 65. There are higher age standardized rates of fall injury for us as women. Now, one important thing, it's not all doom and gloom. One important thing that I do to maintain my health and my mobility and my strength and my general functioning as an adult is to regularly to spend time on the floor, particularly in the evenings. During the day, I'm often sitting or standing and moving around as much as I can. But in the evening, when we have that very sort of sedentary period, as we get older, it's common that we could be sitting for 2, 3 hours in the evening. That's when we can actually very gently come down to the floor and do some really simple techniques for keeping our bodies mobile. So I always say, make the floor your friend. And Tony and I were discussing this on the phone when he called me, and it's kind of like a motto that I use and practice myself. But also, I always suggest this to my friends who are aging as we all are. So getting down to the floor and back up again is actually one of the most functionally important movements we can do as we age. And it requires strength, it requires balance and mobility, coordination, and don't forget, confidence. All in one everyday action. So, for many people, especially older adults, avoiding the floor becomes like this sort of a quiet marker, I would say, of declining movement confidence. And once that confidence goes, we actually see, this quite rapid decline. So when we remove the floor from our daily lives, what we are doing is removing opportunities to maintain these fundamental capacities. I'm sure if you have grandchildren or children of your own, you'll know and see how often little children are on the floor. Yeah, so something kind of socializes us out of that quite early on. Perhaps it's the schooling process, which I'm always talking about, of sitting at tables, which creates this very sedentary habits that we learn and we then use as adults. But children are always up and down and spinning around and doing things on the floor, aren't they? So I often sort of liken children and say, children know what they need. What is it about adults that happens to us where we begin to not tune into the knowing of what we actually need or what our bodies actually need. So, sitting on the floor, we can stretch, we can play, we can rest, we can move mindfully, we can keep our joints mobile, we can maintain lower body or upper body strength, and we can challenge our balance in very safe ways, but also very low intensity ways. So it's not going to absolutely wear you out, which some of the exercise that we do, high intensity exercise that we do as we get older, can actually be quite harmful for us. So it's very important that the floor, as I say, becomes our friend. So it's about embedding movement into daily life in ways that feel natural and in ways that feel meaningful. The floor invites this variability of movement for us. We can roll, we can reach, we can push, we can transition from one move to another. There's all sorts of things we can do. And this is exactly what our aging bodies need. From an aging perspective, then, we are maintaining the ability to get up and down from the floor. And that's closely linked to independence, fall recovery, as well as overall quality of life. So when I say make the floor your friend, I'm really talking about reframing movement as something we sort of live through and not something that we schedule, and also recognizing that these small habitual movements can have profound long-term impacts on how we age. This slide brings the idea of making the floor your friend with a practical focus, and these movements replicate what actually happens in daily life, getting down, changing levels, and crucially, getting back up again. Each pattern that I've mentioned here on the slide integrates strength, it integrates balance, coordination, problem solving in a way that is directly transferable to real life, real world situations. So the first one here, the crawl out, you can try this one at home, as they say. It challenges upper body strength and core stability while also reinforcing controlled transitions. The second one, kneeling get up, is especially important. It mirrors how many people instinctively try to get up after a fall. So practicing both sides really matters as well. As a dancer, I was trained to do this, to always, perform a pirouette on the right, you perform the pirouette on the left, because that creates a better balanced body and this symmetry that we need, particularly as we are aging. So practicing that enables us to reduce fall risk. The third one, the side roll and the push up, reflects evidence-based fall recovery strategies. Rolling to one side, using available strength, transitioning gradually through rather than trying to spring up the way we used to, the way we see our grandchildren and children do as well, encouraging you to practice both your stronger sides, which you will begin to kind of become aware of when you do these exercises, that you've got a favorite leg, a favorite arm for pushing up, and then working with your weaker side as well. And that will build your confidence, but it will also build your adaptability. Now, for those who are more capable, I'm a big fan of mindset of Theo, and he talks us through regularly on Instagram and Facebook and so on, uh, this animal flow, and it's fantastic for those who are a little bit more capable. He gives beginner animal flow movements and works through much more advanced ones. It's a very I like to play a lot as an adult, and I think the way that he offers movement out there to everyone, for me, it's an immediate switch on. I enjoy it. So therefore, with that enjoyment comes motivation. He's very playful the way he moves. He has a great deal of dynamic variability. It's exactly the kind of movement complexity that aging bodies benefit from. And importantly, let's just remember that none of this requires you going to a gym. It's about rehearsing life through movement so that when the unexpected happens, then the body knows what to do. I always say our bodies are very wise, and physical activity helps us to become wiser in our bodies. All right, so these two selected studies bring together two important strands of evidence. Physical activity does for aging trajectories, and what needs to happen at a systems level to support it. Now, I'm a little bit biased, but I think that systemically, we really have some big problems, not only in Australia, but in the UK, where I'm from, whereby movement is actually not revered and valued as much as it could or should be for our aging population. I experienced my own mother going into care a few years ago, and she actually became immobile within a few weeks. So I share that personal example with you because most of the time she was sitting down. When we took her out of that temporary care, she began walking again. So these are perfect examples of how when you have the stimuli around you and you have that kind of support for moving more, that actually we can improve our movement capabilities, even in that very frail period of life when my mum was in her mid 80s. So, firstly, the large scale cohort evidence shows us here on the slide that physical activity significantly reduces the risk of steep health decline and disability as people age. So, in this 2020 Marino Agostino et al. Study, they draw on 8 international cohort studies demonstrating that individuals who remain physically active follow healthier aging trajectories over time. In other words, activity does not just delay decline, it changes the shape of aging itself. It supports sustained functional ability rather than sudden drops in health. What's particularly important here, in my opinion, is that the benefits are not only limited to high intensity exercise. What we see is that regular sustained movement, even at moderate levels, is associated with better mobility, independence, and reduced disability risk. So, this reinforces the idea that movement is protective. That's a really key point here across the lifespan, not just in later life. The second paper, Segar et al. 2025 shifts that focus from individuals to systems. And this 2025 scoping review highlights that while we know physical activity works, implementation remains a challenge, which is what I was just talking about there when I gave the example of my mum. Successful aging related activity programs require coordinated policy support, community infrastructure, trained professionals, and long-term investment. And promoting activity cannot be left to individual motivation alone. So together, these studies make a very strong case. Physical activity is both an evidence-based intervention for healthy aging and a public health priority if we are really serious about reducing disability and maintaining independence and supporting quality of life as populations age, then movement must be embedded into aging policy, community design, and everyday practice, not treated as optional or secondary. So, from a policy and practice perspective, this positions movement as preventative medicine, not optional recreation. Movement is not just about improving physical strength or mobility. It's deeply connected with brain health across the lifespan. So we have a growing body of research that shows that regular physical activity is associated with improvements in executive function, memory, and processing speed in older adults. And these cognitive benefits are supported by several biological mechanisms, including increased cerebral blood flow, enhanced neuroplasticity, and reductions in chronic inflammation, all of which are linked to healthier brain aging. Physical activity also supports brain health through its positive effects on sleep. I'm sure if you do a good walk or a good workout during the day, that you tend to sleep better that same night. That's not just a feeling that happens, it's actually there in the research. What we find is that exercise helps us to regulate our circadian rhythms and to improve our sleep quality in older adults. And restorative sleep then plays this key role in memory consolidation and cognitive resilience, further strengthening the relationship between movement and healthy brain aging. In practical terms, movement supports the brain's capacity to adapt, to respond, and to remain engaged with the world around us. By challenging our bodies through coordinated and purposeful movement, we're stimulating our attention, our problem solving, our emotional regulation, reinforcing this idea that physical activity plays this central role in maintaining cognitive vitality as we age. Now, this large-scale recent study cited here on the slide, Lahoud et al., 2025, took a look at over 16,000 adults. The average age was around about 65. And they found that greater physical activity is independently associated with healthier brain structure, including larger brain volume. So we see, big brain structural changes here. And that's regardless of weight or cardiometabolic health. And this suggests that physical activity directly supports brain integrity as we age. One of the most encouraging findings from recent research summarized in The Guardian is that small changes in physical activity matter for health and longevity. Studies show that even tiny bouts of activity, often called movement or exercise snacks, accumulated throughout the day can lead to measurable health benefits, including reductions in mortality risk. For example, adding just 5 minutes of moderate intensity activity each day, or replacing 30 minutes of sitting with light movement has been associated with significant decreases in the risk of premature death. People who tell me they don't have time to exercise, I'm like, have a movement snack throughout the day, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever you can manage, it will make a difference. So emerging evidence in the second citation here on the slide, Rodriguez et al., 2025, supports the concept of these short exercise snacks, lasting as long as 2 to 5 minutes only. And these can actually improve cardiorespiratory fitness, muscular endurance, increase overall physical activity adherence, and help reduce sedentary behaviors. So additional research also confirms that frequent short bouts of movement interspersed throughout the day are linked to lower mortality and better health outcomes, even in people who do not meet traditional exercise guidelines. So this sort of reframes movement as achievable and accessible, especially for older adults who may feel overwhelmed by formal exercise recommendations. For example, the 10,000 steps a day. There's a lot of research coming out now that says actually for certain age groups, particularly those with less mobility, and certainly in their latter years, 3 to 5,000 steps is actually okay. And that 10,000 steps is a bit of a myth anyway, and has no evidence attached to it. So rather than viewing physical activity solely in terms of these long gym sessions or exercise sessions, we can promote these small, consistent movement habits that are adaptable to daily life and potentially more sustainable over time.
Rachel, we've only got about 8 minutes on the Zoom call left.
Perfect. Just summing up now. At its core, my message today is about quality of life, not simply lifespan. And you can see on the slide here the plethora of holistic benefits that regular physical activity offers us. I'm going to pick out just two age-related issues here with some statistics. Sarcopenia, that's the age-related progressive loss of muscle mass. Strength declines by about 3 to 4% per year after the age of 60, accelerating after the age of 75. That's strongly associated with falls and fragility, loss of independence, hospitalization, and mortality. Osteoporosis affects approximately 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men over the age of 50 worldwide. And by the age of 80, up to 70% of women and 50% of men have osteoporosis. But above all, movement supports our autonomy and our dignity and our participation, enabling us to maintain independence, confidence, and choice as we age. So from this perspective, movement is not just a health behavior, it's a key contributor to our identity, to our agency, and also our well-being in later life. So let's circle back to my initial question at the start of this presentation. If we can't reverse aging, what can we do meaningfully to age well? So I'm going to refer back to my article from 2023, where I talk about making small changes in sleep and diet and exercise. And all of this can support healthy aging, reducing the chance of early death. Thank you for listening. I welcome your questions and discussion. Here are my contact details, my email, my Facebook page. You can catch me on LinkedIn if you're on there as well. And the last reference slide is my references. So if you would like me to send this presentation to you, Tony, for your colleagues, I'm very happy to as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Do we have any questions? June, big voice.
Big voice.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that.
Can you hear?
Oh, yes, I can. Yep.
Oh, thank you very much. That was very informative. One question I have is with your research, is why do you think that health professionals are not talking to the younger generation who probably aren't active or overweight or not eating well of what could happen as they age? Because I found that when I was younger, if I wasn't being active or I was overweight, health professionals never said to me, lose weight because this may happen in 20 years' time or 30 years' time.
Yeah, a great question. I think it comes back to that systemic perspective that I was talking about earlier, in the sense that we have to have all the providers and stakeholders working together. We do have PDHPE where in New South Wales, where we personal development, PDH health and physical education at school right up until year 11. So the students do have possibilities there, but I think it needs to come much earlier. And I think that we need to embed it in teacher education. As a teacher educator myself, I think that, we have to start there because children spend at least a third of their lives in school. So that's a very strong, a very potent possibility for us to begin to get those sorts of active lifestyle messages across, and then working alongside medical professionals. I think medical professionals also have very limited, from what I hear, they're very limited training in the potential of exercise as medicine. And I think that's the kind of bigger way that we have to go, looking broadly at all the different systems.
Thank you.
Any other? Rachel, I have a question, or I'm in my 80s, and I don't carry my phone all the time, but to say 80% of the time. And I notice I finished a year where it says your steps a day average out at 3,234. So it means I must be doing something right. But what I want to ask you is on the BBC this morning, I was reading it at 6 a.m. in the morning. It says, is fibre the new protein? So in the UK, NHS has recommends that adults eat at least 30 Gs of fibre a day. Would you agree with that?
Well, I can honestly say that fiber is, something that we would have done thousands of years ago as human beings. Our whole diet would have been filled with fiber. We were foragers, we were farmers, we were gathering berries and growing all different types of crops and so on. And that was our standard diet. And I'm sure that our gut bacteria were healthier then than now, where we have this infiltration by the food industry of very much ultra processed foods, UPF we call them. And regularly when I look at my plate when I eat, and certainly I'm not perfect and I'm not pretending to be, but 2/3 of my plate is generally vegetables in my meal for dinner, and that's standard. So we overeat carbohydrates, we overeat ultra processed foods.